Hello, and welcome to the week 5 of our Agentic research course. Today is going to be about literature search and review. I'm pretty excited about this because I was actually working with it and developing it a little more last week. And I was surprised how good it becomes when you have an agent that does not have a bias in literature review and literature research. And you can basically have it to review the whole field. So without any further delay, let's go and have it. Okay. So here, basically, we're gonna have, sorry, let's continue here. Okay, so just like to reorient ourselves, week 1, we talked about version control and GitHub, which is a safety net. Week 2, we talked about Cloud Code, the agent that works within the safety net. Week 3, we talked about project management and how we design an epic sub-issues and plan mode, and then doing a review of the pull request that we make for the project. And then week 4, we talked, like last week, we talked about continuous integration and continuous deployment. How basically we should have automated checks and why we should have automated checks outside the repo on every push, and that is required for collaboration. And today is about literature review. Interestingly, it is built up on actually the first, third, and fourth week. So mostly on the third week on the project management. But you can see basically from this week how things are built on the core skills, and then these are just nuances there. So if you have something specific to your use case, it is basically probably best that you try creating your skill. It's going to be the last week that we talk about how to create your skill, but at the same time, you probably get the idea and you start working on that yourself by then. Okay, so regarding the failure modes that we have for reviews, especially when we do not have a structured review, we have probably 3 major failures, and probably you are also a little like uh, be surprised when we do unstructured review. Usually we always do unstructured review when we do a Google Scholar search, for example, or something like that. Basically, we do not plan for it, and we just do a simple search. And sometimes that leaks to our overall understanding of the field and environment as well. And I think the agentic research can help with that very easily because it saves time into search, but it helps us see a fuller landscape. So the first problem is basically a string of pearls. So there are papers, but there is no connecting thread in between them. The second is that usually our search and our search results are swamped with the latest literature, and we do not get the theory, the basics, or the things that are basic classical or just the fundamentals. And if we do use a chat GPT or something like that, it is much less now, but there are hallucination is a pretty major problem with academic research and agentic research. So we need to fix all of them. So the idea is that what we do is right in this age is that we want to prevent our review to fall into these traps. And the issue is that our AI, if we do not control it, which we talked about it on week 2 as well, and week 3 and 4 was actually to control it, is that would fall into these traps a lot faster and a lot harder and a lot more with more catastrophe and with more problems. So we want to just fix this basically. So why AI raise the stakes to make sure that we are doing a fully grounded research, basically a review that is fully grounded. We know that the agents fabricate citations and references, and they do basically make it so credible and so real that until we force it back, it doesn't take it back. It just believes that it is there. And then the other part is that we always want, and this is our human nature as well, that we have a confirmation bias. So the agent paraphrases the result and the parts based on our instructions as well, but it doesn't get to the limitations or the nuances of the paper. So it doesn't get to analyze the paper on the merits. The other part is that we have a recovery bias. So we just tend to get we and the agents tend to get the top results when it comes up top, and different search engines and systems have their own algorithms for providing us with the top result. And we tend to not see the second, third, fourth page. So basically what I'm going to get at here is that the fix that we want to do is basically the structure that we are going to fix, not the style, not like just doing a review. Everybody knows hopefully how to review, how to construct a review. Basically, we want to create a pipeline where every claim and every citation is mechanically basically traceable to a stored and retrieval artifact. Everything that we're going to talk about next is about how this pipeline works, how this mechanical basically hooks and harnesses work for the research, for the literature review that basically I have designed, and I work through the months, not years, but months before. Okay, so let's do a basically, like, based on that, let's do a reframing. If we remember from week 3, basically a lit review is a managed pipeline. So same as week 3, it is like same as any project. It is an epic with sub issues, branches, and pull request, and review of the pull request. Then we just add to that a citation grounding at every step. So we make sure that every claim and everything that is there, it is grounded to a real citation. And also we do add basically a boomerang of a review. So anything that comes out of a review, we just go back and feed it back until the collection, until like we have the gaps that we identified filled. So basically a lit review, we can say it as a research with a definition. So the lit review that we are going to talk about here, which is like basically, I want to say it's a skill, or more or less, is a research with a definition of done. And that's probably like the most important thing in agentic research as well, or agentic work, that you need to have a definition of done. When your quality checks, your goals are met, usually the goals should not be really biased, but at the same time, it should have a check and balance on how to confirm that the goal is met. So the same way that a feature branch is not done until the, for example, continuous integration or GitHub like checks are green, literature review is not done until every claim point at the cards, or at cards is just like a documents, at the documents that we have, and the review has gone at least once and checked and passed. Okay, so basically the idea is this workflow that we define an epic and direction. Usually we talk to the agent using like to create an epic, and we give it strands. For example, if we want to do like, and we're going to do this, if we were going to do like a literature review on, for example, people watching a movie, we try to give it strands of like directions which are more interesting for us, but do not close it, would not close it. Probably it would find other strands or threads as well. Then we go on the collect side. So we collect the basically papers. Then we synthesize the structure overall based on what we found. Then we draft it, and then basically we review everything that we found. So the idea is that we need to make sure that this order is enforced. Drafting anything before synthesizing like the whole idea or the whole big picture is a structural error. It's a room for creating a problem. This is not a style choice. This is basically making sure that we have the quality that we need here. And we need to make sure that basically we understand and we identify that each stage has its own tools, and basically, as it is an epic, when a phase or a stage is done, because we run it as an epic development has basically this idea of when a phase or a stage is done, the next stage automatically starts and pick up from the previous one. So, so we're going to talk about basically like all of these stages, and before we do a hands-on, and we're going to start from direction. Okay, so stage 1. Defining the direction with the project plugin and Epic Dev. Just as a reminder, if you want to know that what is here and what I'm talking about, uh, these skills that I'm going to talk about is here under research skills, under project, grant, manuscript. So these are the ones that are basically are being talked about. We talked how to add these to Cloud Code, and we're going to do it again on the basically on the hands-on, and to make sure that everybody has the latest version of this. Also, another thing, if you want to know that this is where to find the materials, it is under courses.osc.earth, and then you can find it under week 5, and yeah, and you can see it here. Okay, let's go back. So what we're going to do as the first step is to do a plan mode and basically start into a plan mode, which you do not need to do if you have the Epic development, because Epic development already has a plan mode inside. And then we're going to just give it as a parallel strands, basically for our use case. For example, I want to look into what is the brain correlates of different angles or perspectives of movie watching, for example, on the psychophysics, on the action, on the language that's being presented, on the emotion, for example. And those, we call it here as strands. So we just gonna give it the strands, and then we ask it to develop it from these portions. So strands are concurrent, basically collection passes. Each strand has its own brief, so its own basically objective. It gets its own branch, its own PR, everything. But the idea is that when we're going to do a literature review, or basically here at literature search, we're going to do them, all of them, in parallel. And that's the power of agentic research. So this is an example. If you have access to this later on, you can also follow like the literature review that you have here, for example, on the basically on the practicum. But if you do not have that, I actually did it on Annotation Garden. I just want to show you this so we know what we're going to talk about, and so how the strands work before like we start to working on strands. Let me see if like the issue number 3 is here. Yes. So you can see that basically we start finding like the workflow here, and then we start finding like the directions that we are going to work on. And if you look at, for example, like number 10, we identified here like 3 strands for this development. This is like a annotation-driven neuroscience research that I'm doing, but this is like how I try to manage it. 3 strands, each one of them found like about 30 papers, and then they pulled it together and I started working. So the idea that's going to happen is something like this. Everything's going to become a PR and then move forward. Okay, so I hope that it is clear how the initiation works. Basically, you start with Epic development. You make it basically on to go and search or design the whole literature review around the directions that you want to have. Hopefully, like you also, as I mentioned, make it that it works, make it open, so if identifies other strands, it can add it as well. But you can also prevent it to do that just by saying it so. And then basically, like in the development, it just goes and does this in parallel, finds many like papers, which is like 99 cards means 99 papers within like a span of 10 minutes or less. I'm just going to talk about like this strand idea, and which basically these are instructions that we have, and later on I'm going to talk about that actually like put this in a skill, so you can actually use the whole thing pretty effectively. But the strand anatomy is having a goal, having a scope. So basically, a strand is a one sentence that basically the main objective, the scope of that, and then what is the deliverable there, what is the acceptance criteria, and what is out of scope for that strand. And then this becomes the idea of going forward and doing basically collecting whatever the strands are about. So without basically this having this brief, the stage 2, which is collecting, is becomes something that whatever agent finds first, it just happens like to that we record that and we just identify those, and that becomes basically the biases that we want to avoid and prevent. So this brief is basically a scope contract that we have when we are basically spinning up and firing sub agents for each strand to run in parallel for us and to collect our basically research documents. Okay, so the next one is to collect our data, and that is done using OpenCite. OpenCite is another effort that I was doing mostly. Where is, okay, so we do not need this, that hopefully it is here. OpenCite, oh, sorry. So OpenCite is this one, which is basically a command line interface, a CLI, that goes and search the internet for the research on the research side. That is like all open source, and finds basically finds papers, like finds papers, can search for papers, and finds a full text and download and convert it for you. It can work with OpenAlex, PubMed, Semantic Scholar, and also it can pull from archive, mid-archive, OSF, so on and so forth. So it is pretty performant. I really like it because actually it corrects me a lot, making sure that I follow basically like find papers that I don't know it's even there. So OpenCite, just going back, basically has 3 directions. One is the canonical, searching for canonical, basically. You can see, and the whole idea is just basic. OpenCite is a CLI, so you can run it. It's a Python CLI, so if you have UV, which we talked about it before, if you have UV, then you can basically do a UVX, and UVX means just running this Python package. And you can do an UVX OpenCite and canonical, and then search for naturalistic stimuli, for example, and find the top 10. Or if it is basically in a search, then you can do a search and it is done. So canonical means to find the canonical papers. Search usually like is to find the recent or specific ones. And then when you have a citing, it is basically making sure that you're citing the paper correctly, and basically gives you the citation, correct citation for the overall basically a paper that you want to cite. I think this is really the cite part. It's very valuable. It just the thing that checks and works as a check for LLMs, but you can also use it yourself. Basically, for any paper, you can just search and have the citation there. For example, if you have a DOI and then you use UVX OpenCite cite and the DOI, it just gives you the full citation for that DOI. And I think this is like a pretty powerful tool to use, even like if you are not having an LLM, just like as a good old CLI usage. Okay, so how the whole basically thing works here. So we understood that OpenCite has 3 tools, but the whole in the end it is just retrieving papers. So what's going to happen is that when we find papers, there are different parallel structures. There might be PDFs, so we download them, and then we get like an open badge. But there are basically papers that we don't get because like they are blocked, so we have this paywall problem. So OpenCite is aware of that, or our skill is aware of that. When we have an open access, the PDF that we are getting gets committed because you can distribute it. But if it is a paywall PDF, even if it finds it, it never commits it. It basically extracts the markdown and it commits that, because I want to say, like, it is my understanding that it is a research fair use. You are not distributing the paper, you are distributing the basically converted portion or version of the paper that you're going to use yourself. Usually people do not share that. So that's the whole idea here. And you can see, like, basically when you have the results, then you can, if you are not using like the whole idea of basically even LLMs, OpenCite itself can run this for you. These are not LLM based, not at all. So you just do OpenCite and then batch fetch. So you basically find first search and the search goes to the results. And then if you want to just fetch it, you start from this JSON and then you convert it to papers. It has basically mechanisms, either paid or open source and free and local, to convert the papers to Markdown, because we want to be able to read it, and reading a Markdown, reading a text is much easier than reading a PDF. And then basically the summary as a report.json just creates what was downloaded, what was open, what has a redistribution okay, and so forth. So I think this is, again, like a really powerful tool for our research domain overall. And I hope people use it. I'm using it on a daily basis for everything, basically, that I'm doing. And it's gonna, like, and I build tools on top of it, basically, here. So in the end, like when we have all of this, so we basically fetched our papers. What happens next after fetching everything is the paper card that we're going to have, basically a summary of everything that the paper has, that we're going to use it for later for our creating, synthesizing everything. So usually, like, we have a folder per paper, or that's like the instructions, that we have a folder per paper and we have a card.markdown and the source.pdf if it is available, and the source.markdown which is available, which is basically always there. So it is like the main results. So the source can be a PDF, but it should for sure be a markdown so it can be searched, and the card.md is created or summarized from that. Usually, like, the front matter is a queryable basically object that you can have, like, basically type here, slug, DOI, license, so on and so forth. Then there are 6 required sections for the paper card. And I'm just again, like, these are when you use the agent, like the skill, it's going to just create everything. But I just want to make sure that you know it. So if you want to change it, you can change it easily. And also you know it because to understand, like, how the quality is enforced. Hopefully, like, this gives you an idea when you want to create your own skills, or when you want to do this and then it breaks, you know where it broke, and then you go back and fix it. So there is 6 required sections: TLDR, summary, relevance, notable details, open questions, and citations. So this schema is basically the rigor discriminator. With this, basically the corpus is queryable and uniform. Without it, it's just free-form notes like the source.md, without specifics here that we have. So this is basically when we have this all together, then we have a really nice body of literature that are all having a good, quote unquote, good summaries, that are driven, at least a summary, that are driven with these 6 subsections, basically. So after that, and having everything like that, we need to having some basically calibration spread. The idea of this calibration is that, for example, like when we basically have papers, we need papers that are directly dependent of the strand's claim. We need to make sure that the medium, basically, there are some adjacent ones that are, quote unquote, like almost like related to the aim of the strand, of the goal of this basically branch of literature review. And then there are some things that are just tangential, just a background context, and we need to make sure that we have those for a fuller picture as well. So an over-concentrated system is not pretty good. The reason is that having this basically blinds us to the wider field and avoids making this a balanced review. So basically the idea is that if there is more than 40% at one level, of like 40% of papers that are found at one level, let's recalibrate and find like other basically categories to basically balance them out. It's okay that we are not using it, but we should be aware of that. So this is the first of the 3 defenses that we have on the thumb on scale against thumb on scale against like biasing about something that we just want to know and we just do not basically avoiding having a laser focus and losing the whole picture. It is cheap, it is basically mechanical, and also it applies to anything, any field. And then basically, like you can basically have this on paper card and under schema, so it's gonna work pretty well. So we did 2 stages right now, and if you remember, like, so we did basically we did basically like the strands, and we got our data. If you're gonna go back and see on the annotation garden system, so basically each strand creates a basically like a document or a completed document overall. And then still, like, there is no review. It is just tables, hierarchies, and maps. So there is no written review yet. And then there are basically like relations between the strands as a tool used by a data set or a method enabled by this by like basically a standard that is connecting the strands basically. Then basically we should do a gap analysis here. And the gap analysis can basically work us through stage 4 or can work us back all in the beginning. And that's the idea of, if we have gaps, we either identify it and go back, or we just go, if it is catastrophic, or we just go forward. We basically do the manuscript structure, and then we just go back and fill those gaps. So stage 4 of what we talked is basically starting the manuscript formatting. Having the format, this is just not what I want to make sure that we are not doing a manuscript writing. We are just doing a literature review, but we are using skills that can help us to do a really structured review, basically process, and have a structured report. Later on, basically, it can be for a project that you're starting. It can be for a grant proposal. It can be for a paper or whatever that you want to do, but I think like for literature review is almost all very similar, having a similar path with different depths, basically. So the mini review basically looks at the strands, at the citations, and then we're going to talk about it here. And we're going to do like this mini review here for our practicum as well. But we need to mention, like, basically on the manuscript formatting, which one of these reviews we're going to do based on our use case. The scoping review is basically mapping the extent of the literature on a topic. Usually it is a broad search, and then we categorize. A narrative review, so a narrative review is a selective thematic synthesis with arguments. So whenever, like, basically you mention that I want this literature review to be like a narrative review, like you started from the epic, but then when you call again, like the manuscript formatting or the LLM calls it makes sure to mention that it is a narrative review. And then we have the systematic review, which is an exhaustive and reproducible search with a known protocol, which is like, for example, the Prisma protocol. And we do not do it today, but the idea is that you do a search, and then from the search you bring together, and then you filter based on your basically ideas, or based on your topics, or basically filter criteria, and then you move forward. Again, like I think like even systematic reviews are perfect on the part that you can have agents to do the systematic reviews. They do not usually have a bias, and they do search and just collect everything together. Please make sure that we understand we need to have the IMRAD background. So introduction, method, results, basically discussion. What is A? I forgot. Sorry. IMRAD format. Yeah. So yes. Oh, it doesn't have why. So why there is A there? No idea. Okay. Probably, at least, like, I don't know. Okay, so we are following this. We're going to talk about it a little more later on, but the idea is that we are usually following these steps anyways. So basically, like, what you want to do is to make sure that within your epic definition, you pick a structure, and then based on the structure that you have. You mentioned that you want to do this part this way of literature review, and then basically because of the skills that are available to the agent, it understands what's going to be there and how is everything is going to format it, and it's going to even change a little bit of the strand definitions as well. So then basically the next stage after like structuring the whole manuscript is the idea of cite the card, not citing anything that you want. And the idea is that every claim that we have should cite a paper card by the relative path. So not somebody like the DOIs or something. It's just basically uh, citing the file, not citing the person or the paper. If the agent on the claim cannot link it to a card, the claim cannot appear in the draft. And then we should have a thematic organization, basically grouped by argument and not by year. And this is the idea that usually like agents fail. They try to have a story that is just basically like really followed up chronologically, but we need to just make it sure that it just basically follows by a theme of the paragraph or of the section and moves forward. And then we need to make sure, like, and this is like basically instructed there, that we have a citation weaving. So things are integral and things are integrated to each other, not as like separate islands. So basically, again, like to make this is basically like the cite-the-card rule is the second of defense against like the bias that we can have or agents can have on changing like of having a thumb on the scale. Hallucinated citations are impossible to add because they are not having they do not have a card dot markdown. So they do not have a markdown basically there. And stage 5 is basically, so after like basically like this happens, the agent writes it up and works it out and create a paper for you or create a report for you. And the last one is basically a review of the paper. And that's another skill that we have under the research skills manuscript plugin, which is basically review the paper based on the goals that was stated there. And because we have access to the goals and everything like that, we have this boomerang part. So basically plays as a peer reviewer role. It has different basically skills or sections on the methodological rigor, on the statistical validity, on the balance, on the scope creep. So there are specific basically instructions how to evaluate those. You can have your own basically skills, or you can have your own instructions that overrides this, but there's a default that I basically, based on my preferences, I have added there. And basically, like, to be honest, more on instructions that journals also provide. So I just compiled them together and made it as a brief paper review here as a skill. So the findings are tagged by severity, whether they are critical, major, or minor, very like the paper review. And if it is a critical or major, it just cycles back on the missing evidence, missed scope direction, wherever it is as a critical error. And then usually the review should provide you with a critical or major finding, very similar to a paper review. If it is converged, usually there's a red flag. If a reviewer comes back and say, hey, this is awesome, it is good as it is, probably you should ask, oh, are you sure? And it's not something that works pretty well. So it's not that to be happy, it's basically to be skeptical if you get a green and go ahead on the first pass of the review. So this is basically the third defense that we have, and to make sure that we are not having the bias here. So again, to just make this basically follow as a conclusion of how we are protecting our research and research review, we talked about 3 defenses and 3 best practices against biases that we have. Each one is in or like a different stage of our production. One is the calibration anchors, making sure that we have the cards and we have basically a very correctly. We are just basically making sure that we are connecting basically our findings to our strand, and we make sure that like we have enough of highly relevant, medium relevant, and loosely relevant papers to the strand, so we are not laser focused on one like basically scope. So the calibration anchors is there. Having citing the paper cards are really important. Basically, if there is no card, there is no background for the paper, we basically make it impossible. We cannot cite it, so we make hallucinations almost impossible unless like they hallucinate the card and they hallucinate the paper that was retrieved. And the reason that we use OpenCite, and it is not LLM based, is that we deterministically have a paper and have a markdown. And based on that, we ask a LLM to create basically a summary of that markdown. And usually like that is not hallucinatable in a sense. And then the boomerang is basically at a review time, making sure that we cycle back and cycle to the corpus, and not just creating like, not just changing the narrative, the prose, the write-up of the manuscript. We go back to the corpus, to the drawing board basically, and make sure that we do it correctly there. So this is basically the 3 best practices that we have, one per stage. Stage 3 is collecting the whole thing, so that's why it doesn't have this, and hopefully it works for you as well. Again, I want to just iterate that a review that you do in one Convergence at one shot is either nothing to say or is hiding what it found. So it is really important that both of them are not good. We should know, and we should get a review that has both favorable and unfavorable findings. Even if you look into the annotation garden, like the PR number 10, or like we're going to see it now as well, or later on in the practicum. I don't know if we get to the PR today or not. Usually, like on the review, it says positives and negatives. If you do not get anything, it's the bad thing that happened. So for we're almost done. I'm gonna just do like what we're gonna do on the live demo, and then finish up and then fire the live demo. So what we're gonna do is basically, again, like we talked about it, that we're gonna do a neural correlates of naturalistic movie watching, organized by 4 perspectives at least on the psychophysics, action, language, emotion. And this extends our week 3, basically child mind, HBN movie watching practicum. Then basically like I didn't actually build it, so right now we're going to build it together. But the idea is that we have the epics and the strands and so forth, and you're going to see it, and then we're going to work through these actions together. Remember that this is going to be a live, so we do not want to manufacture a gap and then make sure the review gets it. We will work it together, and then if a gap comes up, then we're going to have it together and make it together, basically resolve it together. Okay, so I hope that this was a informative session. This was a really informative session. Actually, like creating this and doing a literature review during the past couple of weeks was a really rewarding one for me. Just remember, like basically today we did a literature review with every claim are grounded and retrievable, and the reviewer feedback is there to guide us and prevent us from biases and hallucination. We did review the 3 defenses against like thumb on scale and biases, and we make sure that makes sure that we are doing a good review. And we're going to have like next week talking about how we can actually use this and start from making a grant proposal altogether. And the week after that, we're going to talk about manuscripts as well. So everything that we did here on week 5 is going to directly be used for week 6 and week 7. So here, basically, I mentioned again, we talked about the pipeline. I talked about a live research that I'm doing right now under Annotation Garden. And then we're going to talk about practicum right in a moment. What we're going to do is basically exactly like this in live, and then we will make it together and see if we can get to the boomerang. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I'm gonna basically, this is done. We are at the end of our session. Feel free to ask, and while I'm trying to address them, I'm gonna basically bring up the I'm gonna bring up the chat and also the live demo. Okay.
I have questions.
Yeah, of course.
So I like to use beep text instead of cards, because then it's directly citable. You know, it can make it avoids intermediary, and then you can add custom fields to your beep text file. What do you think?
So seems to be a good path. There are a couple things, because like if you have a beep text, so the part on top of that, like on the cards, is basically, I want to say, you can have the citations on top as a YAML, basically a header, and that's going to work as you have, or just like have a DOI and the open site will retrieve the beep text anyways, very fast, like with just one call. That is just not even not LLM. So that's one part. But if you have that, basically the paper cards can be quite long, and I can basically show you probably like very fast. But the whole idea is that hopefully. What I'm gonna say here, Claude.
Yeah, I'll let you start, and then you
Yeah,
can
no. So basically, like if you have the beep text and you have extra fields, and then you want to move them together, it's gonna be like a really huge beep text that you're gonna move here and there into overleaf, and basically it has not just abstract, but your also notes about the paper. If it is good for you, all good. If it is not good, I think you can have it separate, and you can have a very small bib text that is just about the citations, and then you move forward with that.
Okay. Yeah. So the advantage of the cards is that it leaves the notes about the paper and how it's relevant to the question.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
And second question. Well, I mean, just start what you're doing, and then I can ask my question.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is like exactly the same thing. So I'm gonna do an epic dev. So and I just actually like this morning I created, or I just put everything together here on the literature review, basically practice. And but I'm gonna say it here. So let's do a lit review on this. This helps us ground our processing results and conclusion. Okay. Conclusion. You can use let's review skill for this. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
We're ready for my second question?
Yes, it's gonna work.
Yeah, so for documents, I like to have Claude draft and then have ChatGPT review. I don't know if you see any advantage of using different AI to draft and review, or
I definitely see advantage there. There are different portions. I think I started, so I have actually like Codex here as well, and Codex is the ChatGPT cloud code, so it's just like the terminal, and it has like a review and stuff like that as a skill, as a plugin. So my take on the review, I haven't seen, at least like from my workflow, on the review of like, I don't know, code, specific code developments like PRs. I've seen like it finds structural problems and like basically brings up structural issues pretty good, but not on the software like implementation of the specific PR. So doing once in a while, basically structural analysis of the whole system, finding the gaps, finding the shortcomings and improvements, I think actually is pretty good. But on a usual like a regular basis, I started doing that, but then it found, like, at least like for my workflow again and the projects I'm working on, it found very similar things than like with the Cloud Code review, and so I stopped doing it. Interestingly, like here I have Codex because like I was given a Codex actually by a friend that works at OpenAI, but to make sure that I talk about Codex here in this like sections or in this series. I actually, like, for the many of the images, like the icons in the first, like a second slide, I'm using Codex or OpenAI to create and generate images. If you have a front end development, or if you have something that is like good development of like a presentation, for example, like this presentation overall, it was generated, like the whole platform, not the presentation itself, but the platform that right now it has. I don't know. You can see the review. You can see the overview of each slide. This is basically this is not a PowerPoint or anything. It is basically a JSON that goes into a presentation platform and then shows up like this, and it has I don't know, a presenter view as well, for example, and it shows everything like this. And basically, I generate everything with LLMs, with Claude, and it goes to the JSON, including the animations and everything, and then it shows up. But Claude could not create this. I tried a lot, and it could not. But Codex did it like really fast and really like strongly. So if you have overall, if you have anything that is like user facing or front end, I think Codex is very, very good. On the back end and more humanistic research or humanistic development, I think still Claude rules. So yeah. Okay.
So first you were calling Codex from Claude right there with /Codex.
Yeah, Codex has a plugin for Cloud Code. So you can install it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just need to plug in your subscription and then you can
Yeah,
set
yeah.
Codex
So
to that website.
if you start a Codex once in your terminal, and it has your I don't know, API key or subscription, then whenever you do this code like /Codex, then it just fires the same thing in the background. Yeah.
Okay, and well, just continue your thing and then I'll
Yeah,
ask more
so
questions.
here you can see that exactly, like if you were following, you can see that basically we created an epic, and the epic has a plan by itself, and the title is the literature review with 4 perspectives. And you can see that there are strands here as we talked about it, and there are going to be a briefs, and there are going to be collections, synthesis, and the direction paper, and then self-review, exactly the same things that we mentioned. And so this is basically like the whole thing just created while we were talking, and I think one sentence. So now if we do agree, which it seems to be pretty good, so we just basically say yes, and give it some motivation. Sounds great. Let's go. Okay.
Yeah, so another question is,